With that, I would like to introduce Kimball Garrett, who will then introduce our speaker for tonight. Kimball.
Okay, thank you, Ron, and thanks for the honor of introducing Phil. Phil Unitt is the Dennis and Carol Wilson Endowed Chair of Ornithology and Curator of the Department of Birds and Mammals at the San Diego Natural History Museum. And somehow I'm guessing that Dennis Wilson is not the late drummer of the Beach Boys, but I'm not sure. Anyway, there Phil has guided the growth of a very important regional bird collection. He's personally prepared over 4,000 bird specimens and done a bang-up job with it, I would add. Phil's a lifelong San Diegan who majored in zoology at San Diego State University, graduating with honors. In the ornithological and California birding communities, Phil's known for a great many accomplishments, perhaps most notably his careful and dedicated editorship of Western Birds, the Journal of the Western Field Ornithologist, for some 35 years. Phil is as careful with grammar, syntax, and style as he is with bird identification, and his editorial skills are legion. His detailed yet accessible writing style is evident in several of his books, with which most of you are familiar. The Birds of San Diego County in 1984, Birds of the Salton Sea, Status, Biogeography, and Ecology, co-written with Guy McCaskey and Michael Patton in 2003, and then the fantastic San Diego Bird Atlas from 2004. Phil has undertaken detailed studies of geographical variation in many bird species, including the willow flycatcher, horned lark, marsh wren, cactus wren, brown creeper, and several others. He's one of the most active researchers on the avifauna of the Baja California Peninsula, and his detailed research on the response of bird life to massive wildfires in the woodlands and chaparral of San Diego County has been fascinating, and much of that has been published. In recent years, one of the primary research subjects for Phil and his colleagues, including Laurie Hargrove and others, has been the gray vireo. And tonight Phil is going to talk to us about the work on this species that team has done in Southern California and Baja California. So welcome, Phil. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Kimball. So shall I go ahead and share my screen now?
Yeah, you're all set, Phil. The stage is yours.
Good. Sorry, there's a bar at the top of the screen blocking things. So anyway, now we're ready to go. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk with you today about one of North America's most obscure birds. I suppose we could debate over whether it's one of the most charismatic, but for Laurie and me, its obscurity is a big part of its charisma. And I want to be sure to recognize my co-author, Laurie Hargrove, as the real leader and brains behind our study design and analysis. So one basic fact about the gray vireo is that its range is pretty limited for a North American bird. Here's one range map that's pretty rough, but gives you a general idea. The species is migratory, but it migrates only a relatively short distance. I want to be sure to disabuse anyone of the notion that the California population is some trivial outlier. It represents a substantial portion of the range, and its loss would be serious in a range-wide context. Within the general range, the gray vireo's distribution is patchy, and the numbers and population density are low in all parts of the US breeding range, which is the great majority of the entire breeding range. So we can't understand the gray vireo's decline without knowing its history. So let's start at the very beginning with its discovery at what is now Prescott, Arizona by Elliott Cowes in 1865. He got only one, so he inferred the species was exceedingly rare. It was in 1877 that the gray vireo was first found in California, at Campo, just north of the international border, by Frank Stevens, the first spring after he arrived in San Diego County. Decades later, Frank Stevens was one of the founders of our museum and our first curator. So the Gray Vireo has been part of my department's history as long as is possible. The next big step toward understanding the Gray Vireo came in 1908, when Joseph Grinnell, Harry Swarth, Walter Taylor, and Charles Richardson made their epic exploration of the San Jacinto Mountains. It was a new bird for them, and they considered it one of their most important discoveries, worth 6 pages of discussion in their published report. They identified its habitat as chaparral, dominated by chamise and redshanks. They found 2 nests, photographed one. You can imagine carrying around those glass plate negatives on mule. And they described the female's habit of sitting so tightly that she could be picked off the nest by hand. They estimated a population density and extrapolated a population of nearly 1,000 for the entire San Jacinto Mountains, which is a critical benchmark for us today. One thing that makes the 1908 expedition so valuable is that it immediately preceded the invasion and proliferation of the brown-headed cowbird in California, which was a catastrophe for many of our songbirds that had never before experienced a brood parasite. The effects on the willow flycatcher, Bell's vireo, yellow warbler, and other riparian birds were obvious to California's ornithologists of the 1920s and 30s. The plight of the gray vireo in its more remote and difficult habitat didn't attract attention until 1944, when Wilson Hanna found a nest with 2 cowbird eggs in the Cajon Pass. An experienced egg collector, Hanna had been alarmed for years over the frequency at which he saw the gray vireo nests were failing. That's an ostrich, of course, that egg that Hannah's holding there, not a gray vireo. So in San Diego County, after the death of Frank Stevens in 1937, the gray vireo became a lost species for decades, until Mike Evans rediscovered it while running a breeding bird survey route in 1977. The steep, impenetrable chaparral was just not popular among birders. In 1978, the gray vireo was recognized by the California Department of Fish and Game as a species of special concern because of its rarity and vulnerability to cowbird parasitism. The field work for our San Diego County Bird Atlas from 1997 to 2001 gave us our first clear view into the actual status of the gray vireo in San Diego County. At that time, on the basis of the numbers reported, I estimated the total population to be in the low hundreds. Now, you might notice that in addition to the green squares for the breeding season, there are these 2 kind of purplish squares out here in the Anza-Borrego Desert, south of Ocotillo Wells. That was one of the most exciting discoveries of our Atlas study, since previously the gray vireo was unknown in California in winter. As you probably know, one of the goals of an Atlas study is to cover all cells, or at least selected cells, in the defined grid to at least some minimum criterion of coverage. In San Diego County, our goal was to cover all of our 479 cells. Even square K28 in the Anza-Borrego Desert, which requires hiking 3 miles all the way across square K29 to get to its eastern edge. But Lori did that in May 1999. In the canyon of Alma Wash, she discovered a stand of the elephant tree, Bursera microphylla, bigger than was known even to the state park's biologists. The elephant tree is at the northern edge of its range in Southern California, where there are only 5 known populations, of which this is the largest. You might have noticed elephant tree area on the map. So when Lori told me about the elephant trees, I remembered this article by John Bates calling attention to a close association between the elephant tree and gray vireos wintering in Sonora. In winter, the bird feeds heavily on elephant tree fruit and regurgitates the seeds, serving the tree as a seed disperser. So I thought, maybe those elephant trees in the Anza-Borrego Desert need a seed disperser too. So over the first weekend of December 1999, 9 of us backpacked into square K28 for a 2-day survey. In December, the days are short enough that a single day doesn't suffice to hike in and out and still leave enough time for a thorough search. We were thrilled to find a minimum of 5 gray vireos. It's not often in field biology that one has the opportunity to make a prediction from a hypothesis and then confirm the prediction through testing in the field. These photos show the habitat in Starfish Cove at the upper end of Alma Wash. Yes, bleak, but you see a few elephant trees. Since 1999, Lori has gone back almost every winter to monitor the birds in the trees. With just herself or maybe one other, she has found only 1 or 2 gray vireos in subsequent years, and in recent years, sometimes none at all. The abundance of the fruit that we observed in 1999 has never been equaled since, and many trees have died. As you surely know, 1999 was the dawn of our age of drought, which has been particularly severe in the southern Anza-Borrego Desert. In 2008, the California Department of Fish and Game revised its list of species of special concern, and I contributed the account of the gray vireo. I mapped the breeding distribution best I could on the basis of the literature and collections available, with shading representing areas of fairly continuous distribution and triangles representing more isolated records. So the blue circles enclose areas where the gray vireo is known to persist in recent years, dark blue for more substantial populations, and light blue for apparently scattered pairs. These red circles highlight areas formerly occupied, but that lack recent records. I suppose I should have changed red to light blue for Joshua Tree National Park, since Lori located 2 there in 2018, the first gray vireos known there in many years. But let's focus now on the area Grinnell and Swarth highlighted, the San Jacinto Mountains. They specified finding the gray vireo in 9 areas, which from 2008 to 2014, we targeted with multiple surveys focused on the gray vireo. For example, on Thomas Mountain, Lori and I leapfrogged our way down the entire chaparral covered ridge below the edge of the pine forest. Another day, we walked the entirety of the road up Santa Rosa Mountain from Highway 74 to Garnet Queen Mine. Our result was just 2 territories in that last area, none in any other. So we conclude that the population of nearly 1,000 projected by Grinnell and Swarth has probably been reduced on the order of 99%. So we proposed a study to investigate in detail why the gray vireo is faring so poorly. We focused on the 2 regions of San Diego County we knew from the atlas to be centers of the population. Our 2-year study entailed monitoring about 30 territories per year at about 10 sites with visits every 2 to 5 days once the birds begin arriving in late March. We watched the birds to locate nests and then deployed spy cameras on a subset of those nests. Then after nesting was over, Lori went back to quantify the habitat around the nests. The cameras designed for this project, we designed them, were very small and camouflaged, clipped to the shrub about 2 to 3 feet from the nest. Then a 30-foot cable led to a camouflaged toolbox containing the digital video recorder and battery so that we could change the memory card and the 25-pound battery without disturbing the nest. And I do have a bit of guilt for Lori and Leah, 2 petite women, carrying those 25-pound batteries in their backpacks up those steep slopes in that dense chaparral. Here's Tom Myers installing a camera. We also tried some more conventional motion detecting cameras, but they didn't give us enough results to be worth analyzing. So typically, the vireos stayed on the nest while we set up the cameras, or they returned just a few minutes later. So we were happy, thrilled, amazed to find 95 active nests over the 2 years. And that's due largely to the talents of Lori and Leah Squires. Another 15 nests were abandoned or destroyed before being completed, just as Wilson Hanna observed. We had enough cameras to monitor 30 nests over the study, rotating them after the targeted nest failed or the young fledged. The territories were clustered, and the birds remained in them through the season and returned the following year in spite of failures. And the territory locations were very obvious because the male gray vireos sing nearly constantly throughout the day, even from the nest. Gray vireo territories are large for a small passerine, averaging about 11 hectares. And around each of these clusters, we surveyed as well, and they were isolated from other clusters. So what did we find? Unfortunately, very low nest success. Only 17 of the 95 nests fledged any young. 10 were parasitized by cowbirds, though we suspect the cowbirds contributed to the failure of some of those 15 aborted nests. At 68 nests, we confirmed predation or had some basis for suspecting it. And the cameras revealed the #1 predator to be the California scrub jay. Renesting after failure was universal, up to at least 6 times in a season. Now, next to that pair that failed 6 successive times was our only confirmation of successful double brooding by another pair. On one visit, Leah saw a fledgling from the first brood coming to beg from the female while she sat sitting on her second clutch incubating. All 10 nests that we confirmed as parasitized were abandoned. We saw no evidence of gray vireos incubating cowbird eggs or raising young cowbirds. So this is actually a little bit of good news. Out of the 30 nests with video cameras, 7 successfully fledged young, a slightly higher rate than at nests without cameras. So our cameras had no negative effect on the success of those nests. 3 of the video recorded nests were parasitized by cowbirds. And at 5, we couldn't tell the reason for failure in spite of the video recording. Video shows the shrub shaking, and we could never see what was responsible for it. But that leaves 15 with predation confirmed. The scrub jay accounted for 10 of the 15 instances of confirmed predation. One of the nests, a Buick's wren, apparently punctured the eggs. And the most dramatic episodes were a gray fox taking the nestlings and a bobcat that took a swipe at the incubating female and killed her in the middle of the night. So let's try a couple of these videos. Oh, it's already running. Nope. It was actually egg number 2 that jay got. Number 3. And that was the end of that clutch. Let's see here. Oh, now it's running. And that's the one that the fox got. Okay. But we did get some video of young gray vireos fledging successfully. So that was gratifying. The apparent success rate was 18%, but calculation by the Mayfield method of observed exposure days suggests that the real success rate was only 9%. That's much lower than reported in studies of the gray vireo in Colorado and New Mexico. And even at the highest reasonable rate of annual survival, this is insufficient to sustain the population. The success rate seemed to be higher in 2013 than in 2012, but the difference wasn't statistically significant. Also, the modal clutch size was 4 in both years. And this in spite of rainfall in 2013, considerably less than in 2012 and well below average. But a 2-year study really isn't sufficient for a rigorous analysis. We now have a clear idea of the chronology of the gray vireo's life cycle in San Diego County, from earliest arrival in March to departure in September. In both 2012 and 2013, there appeared to be 2 major pulses of egg laying. In the drier second year of the study, nesting began and ended about 2 weeks earlier than during the wetter first year. Both males and females incubate during the day, and they stayed very glued to their nests, just as Grinnell and Swarth found. So we didn't often check the nest's contents. But despite this strong nest guarding, cowbirds still managed to force in their eggs. Here's a nest with 2 cowbird eggs and 1 vireo egg, all punctured or broken. Well, the nest wasn't video recorded, so we'll never know exactly what happened. But a second cowbird easily could have punctured the eggs of a previous cowbird in an attempt to force re-nesting, as cowbirds are known to do. Nests were often found disrupted after apparent depredation, but sometimes they were completely intact with the eggs or nestlings simply missing. Here, disturbance exposes yucca fibers, which are an important component of all gray vireo nests that gives them a silver gray color. So here's what we want to see: a full brood of growing gray vireo chicks. In 2012, Kevin Clark of our team banded 13 gray vireo nestlings, of which we confirmed that at least 8 fledged successfully. In 2013, we actually spotted a banded gray vireo, presumably one of Kevin's, only a quarter mile from where he had banded nestlings in the previous year. So this suggests that in California, gray vireos have strong natal site fidelity, as has been confirmed in Texas. And even though most gray vireo nests came to an unhappy ending, there were a few success stories, such as this fledgling near Lake Morena. I was especially glad when one of the nests that I discovered enjoyed success. Even though this fledgling is unable to fly and looks terribly vulnerable, once the young got to this stage, they appeared to have good survival usually staying very well hidden and closely guarded by their parents. We would re-site the fledglings on most of our subsequent visits to a territory. The great majority of nests were placed in chamise, which contrasts strongly with other states where the majority of the nests are placed in juniper. But we also found nests in a variety of other shrubs, including mountain mahogany and Ceanothus gregii, which our botanist John Redmond tells me we should now be calling Ceanothus perplexans. Nests were considerably more likely to be placed on south-facing slopes than on north-facing slopes. The average nest height was just over 1 meter off the ground, and most nests were on the south side of the shrub. Since territories tend to be on south-facing slopes, this means that the nests tended to be on the downslope side of the shrub. We were able to quantify many aspects of the Gray Vireo's basic breeding biology in a habitat where these things had never been studied previously. I might add that ascertaining the date of laying was tricky because females apparently begin sitting tight on the nest before they actually lay. And in the two top pictures here, you can see the adult standing over the young, shading from the sun. The rate of nest success remained constant through the breeding season. So that's why that line through the graph is flat. It did not drop off toward the end of the season, as been reported in studies of some other species. So recall that we had two study areas, one in southern San Diego County near Interstate 8, and the other one north of Warner Springs. Though our sample size in the north was small, the success of the nests in the north was significantly less than in the south. And this goes along with an alarming contraction of the distribution in northern San Diego County. The red trapezoids represent sites where we found Gray Vireos doing surveys for the bird atlas, but we could not relocate them there in 2012. In spite of surveying along all those routes highlighted in orange, all we could find was the single cluster of territories near Indian Flats campground, the blue trapezoid. The difference between the two study areas did not seem to be driven by a difference in scrub jay predation, but by a much higher rate of cowbird parasitism in the north. And even in the south, density was reduced. In 2002, Lori did some surveys for the Forest Service in which she plotted the territories. We revisited those same areas in 2012 and 2013, finding notably fewer birds, especially south of Interstate 8. So our key finding was that the scrub jay is now the most frequent cause of nest failure, but cowbird parasitism is an added burden that may be the key difference, making the population unsustainable. Scrub jays typically take eggs rather than nestlings, and they appear to find the nests often before the eggs are even laid. The jays search systematically through the shrubs or perch nearby, watching. while the gray vireos spend a significant amount of time scolding and chasing the jays. Videos showed protracted depredation. At one nest, for example, a jay took 1 of 4 eggs in the evening and then returned the following morning to gradually take the remainder of the eggs, while the poor vireos incubated in between. So any habitat changes that favor the scrub jay, possibly rural development and campgrounds, disfavor the gray vireo. And of course, any changes that favor the cowbird, we could say the same thing. Depredation pressure from the jays could vary from year to year. In her study of the wren tit, Chris Preston found that scrub jay depredation was less likely in years when other resources for scrub jay food were greater. Clearly, the compounding of cowbird predation, cowbird parasitism and jay predation is especially important in northern San Diego County. Other factors are doubtless contributing to the gray vireo's decline. Uniform, unbroken chaparral appears associated with greater nest success, suggesting that fragmentation disfavors the species. So this graph in the lower right shows the probability of daily survival of a nest through the life cycle by 2 categories of height of surrounding shrubs. So taller surrounding shrubs that could offer more perches for cowbirds and jays to look down onto those nests were associated with less survival of nests, especially early in the cycle. So a threat that looms especially seriously now is the increasing frequency of fire. Gray vireos prefer chaparral at an intermediate to late stage of succession. All chaparral in which we found territories in 2012 and 2013 was at least 10 years old. And our studies of the effects of the fires of 2002 and 2003, we found only 3 gray vireos in chaparral under 5 years old, and none of those persisted past a single observation. Here is a gray vireo nest in a spindly old chemise in old chaparral, which has no documented history of fire. Some of the shrubs are dead. There's lots of lichen on the branches. Nevertheless, gray vireos also nest in middle-age chaparral and in areas with a patchy, that have burned patchily, and the habitat is heterogeneous. So in 2017, we published our paper in Journal of Field Ornithology, and it's available open access online, as is our final report to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, which was our primary sponsor of the study. So in California, the gray vireo is in worse shape than many other species formally listed as endangered. But specific measures to recover it are hard to come up with. Trapping of cowbirds has proved very successful in narrow riparian corridors, but it's likely to yield poor results in the wide expanses of chaparral. And jays have a long history of being uncontrollable. So experimentation and creativity will be essential. One idea we talked about is fake vireo nests with fake eggs that are treated with some chemical to make them unpalatable, to try to train the jays not to eat vireo eggs. A wild idea, yeah. We do have some ideas for further biological studies, and we're partway through a couple of those. So let's shift gears now to southern Baja in the winter range. Here is the Sierra Cacachilas, which lies just east of the city of La Paz. As you fly into La Paz, you see this range of hills on your east, and that was our study area. Does the association between the gray vireo and elephant tree that John Bates discovered in Sonora apply also in southern Baja, which constitutes so large a chunk of the winter range? The elephant tree is very common in this area. Here's Lori standing under one with an unusually tall trunk. And here's a branch laden with elephant tree fruit. And yes, we found gray vireos in moderate numbers in this habitat. It's nice to see them in fresh plumage and not worn to hell as we typically see them in Upper California in the summer. And we confirmed they are eating elephant tree fruit, as captured in this picture by Alan Harper. So as it hangs on the tree, the elephant tree fruit is covered by a dark purple rind. You can see some in the right-hand side of that picture. The birds strip off the rind, manipulate it in their bills to reveal the bright red aril, which is the nutritious part surrounding the seed and which the gray vireo swallows whole. In the Sierra Cacachilas, we had hoped to follow the vireos around to observe their behavior. Well, we soon found that was impossible in the dense thorn scrub. So instead, we focused on fruiting elephant trees, recording the birds that came to eat. We confirmed 15 species eating elephant tree fruit, demonstrating that the elephant tree is a keystone species of the ecosystem. But some of these birds, like the house finch, just gnaw on the aril while the fruit is still attached to the tree. Or like the verdin, they grasp the fruit in the feet like a miniature parrot, then drop the seed on the ground underneath the tree, failing to disperse the seed like the gray vireo or the ash-throated flycatcher that swallowed the fruit whole and then regurgitate the seed. The ash-throated flycatcher is the most abundant species of bird in the Sierra Cacachilas. So the elephant tree need not rely on the gray vireo for seed dispersal. But in the Anza-Borrego Desert, where the ash-throated flycatcher is only occasional in winter, the gray vireo's role could be critical. So the elephant tree is regarded as endangered in California, and a decline or extirpation of the gray vireo there could affect the survival of those trees, which, as we have seen, is already not very good. Here's our team of birders in the Sierra Cacachilas, some of them: Kevin Clark, Lori, and Leah from the museum, plus Gorgonio Ruiz Campos, who's a professor at the Universidad Autónoma de Baja California in Ensenada. So another question, what's the status of the breeding population of the gray vireo in northern Baja? No one really knows, so we wrote a grant proposal to the Gigi Foundation allowing us to look into that. Our fieldwork planned for 2020 got canceled by the coronavirus pandemic, but this year we started to pick up the pieces. The Sierra La Asamblea in central Baja is south of the Gray Vireo's known breeding range, which extends south to the Sierra San Pedro Martir. But the Sierra La Asamblea has stands of pinyon and chaparral shrubs such as chamise, hollyleaf cherry, and sugar bush. So here's a view from our campsite up to a mountaintop where you see a bunch of cereus or bujum trees growing out of habitat with a bunch of really familiar plants in it. We had high hopes of finding not only the Gray Vireo, but range extensions of any number of other birds and mammals. Botanists had been up in the Sierra La Asamblea before, but no vertebrate biologists. But the disappointment, no Gray Vireos. We had a few scrub jays, probably of the more northern dark subspecies obscura, and Lori found a pair of zone-tailed hawks, but we found no other range extensions. But we couldn't get to the largest stand of pinions on the north-facing slope of the highest summit, so there's motivation to go back, look again. Then in the first week of June of this year, we went to the Sierra Juarez, which is the first range south of the international border. Gray vireos had been reported here in the past, even commonly, but their current status was unclear. We were thrilled to find a minimum of 41 territories over 5 days of surveys on all sides of the mountains. Furthermore, Donatillo Gaunamelo, a student at UABC in Ensenada, a student of Gorgonios, and one of our Mexican collaborators on this survey, had audio recorded a Gray Vireo on the Sierra de Ulloa, a ridge overlooking the city of Ensenada and much closer to the coast than we ever expect a Gray Vireo. Donatillo was doing bird counts in an area with an isolated stand of knobcone pine that is partially burned and is a focus of conservation by biologists in Ensenada. He recorded 4 phrases, but those 4 phrases are enough to identify the Gray Vireo. Also with us on these trips was Gerardo Moron, who's an extremely talented birder from La Paz and took many great photos. And I need to ask our entomologist, Michael Wall, if he can identify this prey. In the Sierra Juarez, we encountered the Gray Vireo in 2 habitats, especially in the northern part of the range, which is really a big plateau. There's extensive woodland of pinyons, a startling contrast to San Diego County, where pinyons have almost died out. At the site of this photo, we found 2 Gray Vireos, the 2 males countersinging, sometimes in adjacent trees. Another startling contrast to our experience north of the border was seeing Gray Vireos in this flat terrain. The east side of the Sierra Juarez is very rocky before the steep drop off to the desert. Here's Gerardo in the habitat where he and Lori found a couple of Gray Vireo territories. On the west side of the Sierra Juarez are vast expanses of chaparral dominated overwhelmingly by redshanks, Adenostoma sparcifolium. Here we found many gray vireos at a density apparently greater than in the pinyon woodland. Fire is a threat south of the border as it is north, as we saw on our trip in June. We saw lots of the Mexican equivalent of Cal Fire driving around in new bright yellow trucks, and many signs admonishing visitors to evite incendios. This is a gray vireo territory in only partially recovered burned chaparral along the road between Ojos Negros and Laguna Hansen. Lori found this nest in the view in that previous picture. There was also some unburned chaparral in this bird's territory. Unfortunately, when we checked this nest again the next morning on our drive out on the 6th of June, we found that it had been depredated. So who knows how the rates of predation and parasitism in Baja differ from those north of the border. One territory that Lori and Gerardo found, they saw a cowbird hanging out, but we saw very few cowbirds over that week. But it doesn't take many. Here's another territory in mixed pinyon and redshank dominated chaparral north of Laguna Hansen. And the nest, which Lori found, is in the pinyon in the center of that picture. And here's the adult incubating, sitting tight on the nest, as is so typical of the gray vireo. So now we have more big questions. Why is there such a wide divergence in status north and south of the border at sites only 50 miles apart? Could the population in the Sierra Juarez serve as a source population for refilling the sink on the north side of the border? The one thing of which we're now certain is that the Sierra Juarez is an important region for the gray vireo in the context of its entire range. One published model suggests the total population of the gray vireo is 400,000 and that climate warming will favor it. We believe this is a gross overestimate based on a failure to consider the patchiness of the species distribution. The gray vireo may fare better in a hotter climate than some birds, but we believe that this expectation, the birds of arid habitats will be favored by a drier, hotter climate, is seriously misleading. Our study of LeConte's thrasher showed how this is certainly not the case for it, and a visit to the gray vireo habitat in Joshua Tree reveals dying pinyon trees and the chaparral failing to recover from fires. So our news from the Sierra Juarez is good, but the gray vireo is still a species of serious conservation concern. Here's the four of us on the June trip in the gray vireo territory with that first nest. It's fun when you can find multiple gray vireos in a day just by hearing their song as you drive through their habitat. Now, Gerardo and Tonatillo are fully tuned into the gray vireo and could lead their own surveys of additional areas. Next year, we go to the Sierra San Pedro Martir and hope to find similar numbers there. So thank you to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Cleveland National Forest, and the Gigi Foundation for sponsoring our studies, and all the folks who have helped us in the field. And thank you for your interest in the little gray bird that always keeps us wanting to learn more. That's my presentation. And if we have any time for
questions, absolutely.
questions.
Yeah, please, you can pop your questions into the Q&A. Thank you very much, Phil. That was really fascinating and wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Um,
Thank
Kurt
you.
L- Kurt Leichner has a question. Do you want uh, to, if you click on the Q&A, you can see the
Yes, yes.
questions?
Hi,
Okay.
Kurt. Yeah, that's a really good question. Um,
So Kurt
so,
asks, by the way, because not everyone can see the question.
oh, okay. Could Grinnell have overestimated the gray vireo population at 1,000? And the answer is certainly yes. But he observed um, uh, the density over a substantial area. And if the distribution was not as continuous, if the habitat was not as uh, um, continuous as he thought, yeah, it would be less. But from what he described, it seems clear that there were uh, many hundreds. So I would say it's uh, accurate, certainly to an order of magnitude.
Oh, great, great. I can read the questions if you would like.
Sure.
Okay. Lance Benner asks, so what's happening with other species in gray vireo habitat that are depredated by California scrub jays? Are they
Mhm.
are there big drops with other species due to scrub jays also?
Of course, we haven't studied those other species in the way we have with um, uh, gray vireo, but um, I think the black-chinned sparrow, when we were working on Bird Atlas and Lori was covering that area around Kitchen Creek, and there were so many black-chinned sparrows that uh, they were singing in rotation, four males around her taking turns going the ring. They were packed in so tight. We went to the San Jacinto Mountains in very similar habitat. We were struck by the lower number of black-chinned, the lower number of sage sparrows, which would parallel the number of lower number of vireos.
Yeah, interesting.
Um, I can't really say, and there's so many, between the drought and the cowbirds and the
Hmm.
um, uh, and I
Yeah.
anything
Seems
more
like
specific.
answers like that would be kind of a complicated answer.
Yeah, it'd take really a lot of intensive study.
Yeah. Yeah. An anonymous attendee asks, how much study has been done recently in the East Mojave on the gray vireo?
Not much that I know about. Um, was it 2018 that we went to the south side of Clark Mountain and we found uh, several bears. Uh, um, when birders go to get to the top on the north side where the most habitat is, but there's substantial pinyon woodland on the south side that you can get around in. And uh, so they're there, that there's quite a number of reports from the New York mountains. We would really like to know what's happening in the Kingston range, which is really hard to uh, climb up into.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, um,
Um,
not much.
not much. John Dunn asks, is it possible that gray vireos are doing better in the southern Great Basin where Woodhouse's scrub jays are found? They seem to
Mhm.
be, they seem to be scarcer in their range in California.
Yes.
Scarcer in their range than California scrub jays. Maybe
Yes.
fewer cowbirds?
Well, and the studies in Colorado and New Mexico found a substantially higher success rate of nests. So, um, different behavior by wood houses and just lower population density of wood houses could be a factor favoring the gray vireo eastern part of its range.
Oh, fantastic. Um, I think we have run out of questions. But before, well, first of all, thank you very much, Phil. That it was a wonderful, wonderful presentation, and we really appreciate you giving it tonight. Um, and
My
also,
pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
oh, thank you. Also, I want to share with everyone what's coming up. So if you wouldn't mind a little bit of screen sharing. We have coming up that was tonight's presentation. Next week on Tuesday, we'll have Andy Birch, who will present on tricky tringas and special guests. As you probably know, we divide our webinars. We have two webinars a month right now, one on an ornithology type topic like tonight. Thank you very much. And the second one on an ID topic. And next week are tricky tringas. And we want to thank Andy Birch for presenting that for us. It'll be very interesting and entertaining. And I love the photo. Next month, we have John Feenstra presenting on tube noses, part one of tube noses. And so that'll be a very interesting talk. And John, as you know, leads many pelagics and is a very, very good pelagic leader and birder. Los Angeles birders did have a member survey lately. Most of you who are here probably responded, but about almost 50% of lab members responded to that. Excuse me, to that survey, and some of we plan on sending out a short report to all our members so that you know how you responded and how we are thinking about how we're thinking about reacting to that response. You don't want to just get rid of the virtual programs, and don't worry, we're not going to be doing that. We love doing webinars. It's handy for many, many reasons. 82% have rewatched webinars or portion of those. If you go to our YouTube website, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of views on some of our presentations, and we thank all of our presenters for allowing us to record these. And slowly, we're building a wonderful resource for birders throughout California and North America to use. 84% are interested in field trips, and we'll be getting our field trips going shortly. And apparently, the respondees, really want to learn about swift swallow identification, pelagic birds, bird songs and calls, and those are all great things to put into our educational type basis. And I think this is the only difficult response. I don't think this is correct, but around 10% of everyone really liked the bird jokes. I presume that means that 90% loved the bird jokes. I'm not sure how to interpret that, but that's kind of the way I'm choosing to interpret it. And finally, we have Los Angeles birders, the students of Los Angeles. No, that's not right. We have Los Angeles birders students, and as you may know, it's a very active section of Los Angeles birders, and they get together on virtually several times a month sometimes. They have some wonderful things going on, identification, trading information. And actually, Susan, are you there?
She stepped away for a minute. So
Okay. Lab S also had their first informal get together in a very safe and virus-free place so that they could actually see each other in the flesh. And many, if not all, of our Lab S students are also very involved with the WFO, Western Field Ornithologists. So, and that which just gives them extra opportunity to learn new things and to explore and to present. And it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for students. If you have any questions or if you know of someone who may be interested in Lab S, it's generally from about 10 or 12 to 18 or so. Please send them our way. You can go to our website at labirders.org and click on the contact us, give us information, and we'll get right back to you. And with that, I want to thank once again Phil Unitt for presenting tonight. And Mark, do you have anything else that you need to add, or did I forget anything?
Nope, nothing else I need to eat or add.
You can tell where my mind is going.
I know. I think you're pretty hungry now. Oh, thank you very much, Phil. It was fantastic. I guess we do have another question.
Oh, I'm sorry. We had a couple more questions come in. Phil, would you mind answering a couple more questions?
Since they're questions that I'm not qualified to answer.
Okay. Well, the first one is from Lance Benner again. Lance asks, what about the decline in LA County since the early 1990s?
Mm-hmm. So all of you have much more direct experience with that than I, since I have zero, but it's difficult to believe that the factors that we have seen in San Diego County aren't operating elsewhere in Southern California.
Yeah.
But do you have more than 2 known territories now? Or even that?
We have 0 known territories now.
Mm.
I mean, we have past not current territories.
Are there unexplored areas that should be surveyed?
Yeah, I think that might be a good indication. Yeah. John Dunn asks, and I'm not sure I understand. I'm still interested in what species is most closely related to. Do you have any thoughts?
No, other than it clearly doesn't have super close relatives, and so is probably a fairly deep branch within the genus Vireo.
Okay. Lance comes back again and asks, one area at Bob's Gap that was territory 30 years ago burned extensively in September 2020, as we know. And I think that's it. Any other questions? If not, and once again, thanks again, Phil. We really appreciate it. And I hope everyone here and shows up for next week for the Tricky Tringas. And we will see you on the web next week. Take care, everyone. I really appreciate it. Thanks again,
Phil. Great job. Really
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Yeah.
Bye
Next time.
Next time.
Goodbye.